Police are negotiating the surrender of actor Jussie Smollett, facing disorderly conduct charges and perhaps more from a Chicago police department that now believes the Empire star orchestrated his own phony attack and tried to pin it on Trump supporters. Breaking news on that straight ahead. And tonight, lawyers for a 16-year-old Catholic high school student are laying out the case against the Washington Post, saying they falsely portrayed Nicholas Sandmann as a racist and worse. We've got analysis from famed Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz and Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin. And is the Mueller probe actually winding down? And as we await word, is the media giving fired FBI official Andrew McCabe a pass? Kristen Fisher and Britt Hume are standing by. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. With the Jussie Smollett investigation advancing rapidly tonight, let's go straight to our Mike Tobin standing by in Chicago. Mike.
Well, Shannon, Jussie Smollett went from star to suspect in just a matter of weeks. Charged with disorderly conduct, filing a false police report, a felony. His legal team has issued a statement. It reads as follows. Like any other citizen, Mr. Smollett enjoys a presumption of innocence, particularly when there has been an investigation like this one, where information, both true and false, has been repeatedly leaked. Given these circumstances, we intend to conduct our thorough investigation and mount an aggressive defense. The Ossundario brothers, once considered potential suspects, testified for 2.5 hours before a grand jury today. Their attorney says they were paid in the alleged hoax, but the payment does not fit the narrative we know publicly. She says the brothers are speaking to investigators because they determined the truth needs to come out.
There was never a change of heart. There was a point where this story needed to be told, and they manned up and they said, you know what, we're going to correct this. So plea deal, immunity, all of that, they don't care about that.
Gloria Schmidt says Smollett must have trouble sleeping tonight and needs to come clean. Police say they are in contact with Jussie Smollett's legal team to try to negotiate a reasonable surrender. He's got a bond hearing tomorrow at 11:30 local time. I should say 1:30 local time. Shannon.
All right, Mike, we know you were on it. Thank you very much working around the clock on this.
Got it.
Well, also tonight,
he described himself as a white nationalist who wanted to establish a white homeland and said, I am dreaming of a way to kill almost every last person on earth. The affidavit provides shocking details. The defendant intends to murder his computer searches. Chris Hayes from MSNBC, Senator Richard Blumenthal, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Senators Tim Kaine, Chuck Schumer, Kirsten Gillibrand, Elizabeth Warren, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Senator Cory Booker, among others. Prosecutors say this Coast Guard lieutenant, who they describe as a domestic terrorist, wrote about biological weapons attacks and had a hit list. He is slated to appear in a Maryland court on Thursday. Prosecutors are
close. Now, many say the president's critics are actually going to be disappointed. Well, Kristen Fisher is joining us tonight with what the president has to say about this whole thing.
Yes. So there are reports right now that the special counsel's report could be released as early as next week, the same time that President Trump is in Vietnam for his second summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. President Trump was asked about that possibility earlier today at the White House. Here's what he said.
That'll be totally up to the new Attorney General. He's a tremendous man, a tremendous person who really respects this country and respects the Justice Department. So that'll be totally up to him, the new Attorney General, yes.
But tonight, the former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe warned against rushing to say that the release of the special counsel's report is imminent.
I think we still need to wait and see when that shows up.
McCabe is continuing to promote his new book in interviews, and the president is continuing to criticize him, even from the Oval Office, while sitting beside the Chancellor of Austria.
Well, I think Andrew McCabe has made a fool out of himself over the last couple of days, and he really looks to me like sort of a poor man's J. Edgar Hoover. I think he's a disaster.
While McCabe thinks President Trump could be a Russian asset.
Do you think he's compromised? I think
it's certainly possible. That was our concern in May of 2017. I haven't seen anything since May of 2017 that would warn me off that possibility.
And breaking tonight, the House Oversight Committee says that Michael Cohen will finally testify publicly on February 27th, the same day as President Trump's first full day in Vietnam. Shannon.
It's going to be a very busy, newsy week next week.
Very busy news day.
All right, Kristen, thank you.
You bet.
And for more on some of tonight's top stories, Fox News senior political analyst Brit Hume joins us. Brit, great to have you with us.
Thank you, Shannon. Glad to do it.
I want to go back to this story where we've gotten a lot of breaking news through the afternoon and evening today on this actor Jussie Smollett. A lot has been made of what we do know, what we don't know in this case, but there's been this big discussion about this idea of victimhood and how it's become very attractive to a lot of people out there. I want to read something from Jason Manning. He's the author of The Rise of Victimhood Culture. He's quoted in a National Review article saying this: perpetrators might not even think of them as false accusations, since in many cases they see it as an attempt to draw attention to a real problem. To the extent that modern society increasingly valorizes victimhood, claiming victim status through outright lies will become more attractive. Brett, what do you make of that?
Well, I think that might be, we don't know what was in young Mr. Smollett's mind and heart in this case. What we do know is, of course, he's gone from being a victim to a suspect and is now clearly firmly under investigation for filing a false police report. And I do think it's possible that someone who has so much going for him in life had to have some powerful motivation to make him attempt something as risky as this scheme, if that's what it turns out to have been. And I think that idea that you were making an application for victimhood, which can be a pretty good deal in America, might well be the reason. I mean, we do now make heroes out of victims. And this has been going on for some time. It's one thing, if you come back from getting shot up in the war, where you're clearly a victim, but you may also be a hero. And quite another if you're, attacked on the street and become a hero by virtue of that. That seems to me to be a different category altogether.
Well, and as we watch that play out in the media, as it's had a roller coaster ride over the last couple of weeks, Buck Sexton tweets this out. He says, "Why should anyone trust the same national media that fell for the obvious, in his words, Jussie Smollett hoax to be world-class detectives and unbiased truth tellers when it comes to Trump-Russia collusion theories?" That tweet comes as we hear the special counsel's report may be wrapping out, and fired FBI official Andrew McCabe is out there making the rounds selling a book. What do you make of the media's treatment of these various issues?
Well, let me just say this about the Smollett case. I think that there's a real distinction to be made here between the way a lot of the local media out in Chicago handled this and the way the national media handled it. The local media in Chicago did pretty well on this story, and I think the reason was that to them it was a local crime story made into a big story by the fact that we had a celebrity as the alleged victim. And they covered it sort of from the police precinct level and kept up with what the cops were telling them, both on the record and off. Mm-hmm. And the result was that they were well out ahead of the things when the story began to fall apart. The national media, I think, looked at this story and decided it was a Trump story, because in the national media, particularly in Washington, there's only one story all the time, and it's Donald Trump. And to most of them, it's Donald Trump and how awful and dangerous he is. So any story that, alleges that Trump supporters have, in the crudest and most bigoted way have assaulted somebody fits right into their view of Trump and of his supporters. And it was just too tempting for them not to jump to the conclusions that they did. And the result is that a lot of them today have egg all over their face. And the same is true of a lot of politicians who have the same attitude. I noticed that tweets that were published by some of these politicians are disappearing from Twitter by the minute. I understand that Adam Schiff took down one where he was talking about how he'd known Smollett and what a terrible thing this was. That's now disappeared. It was posted on Twitter. So there's a lot of backtracking going on, and properly so.
Well, and some of those same folks that are out there, now discussing this McCabe media tour, do you think that they've been equally probative of him? Because some of them have put some serious questions to him. Others seem to accept what he's saying as fact, even though we know he was fired in part for being less than fully truthful with folks inside investigating the FBI.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, this is a man whose firing had to do with his credibility. And he was deemed to have been less than candid, which was a gentle way, it seems to me, of saying that he basically lied to his FBI colleagues. We know that when Robert Mueller was appointed, the letter, the released by Rod Rosenstein, the appointment letter, said that he was picking up the counterintelligence investigation, Mueller would, that had begun under Comey. He didn't mention anything about another counterintelligence investigation, which kind of makes no sense when you think about it. All these things are sort of there to be explored and haven't been. And I think it's puzzling, but I think that whatever McCabe says has to be taken with more than a grain of salt.
Well, he's more than welcome to join us here on Fox News at Night, because we, like you, have many questions remaining. Brit Hume, thank you so much. Always great to have you with us.
You bet, Shannon. Thank you.
And this is a Fox News alert. The lawyer who filed a $250 million lawsuit on behalf of Nick Sandmann is speaking out tonight. Lin Wood wants to punish the Washington Post for allegedly targeting the Covington High School teen, all because of his politics and what Wood calls the paper's political bias. Trace Gallagher is on the case for us from the LA newsroom. Good evening, Trace.
Good evening, Shannon. There is no argument that Nick Sandmann and the Covington Catholic kids were vilified by numerous media outlets, including the Washington Post, after cell phone video showed Sandmann staring down Native American Nathan Phillips. And there is growing evidence that media outlets drew their conclusion before they looked at the nearly 2 hours of video that dramatically changes both the context and perspective, showing the altercation actually began with a group of black Hebrew Israelites who called the students a list of obscene and offensive names. Investigators hired by Covington Catholic High School and a Kentucky diocese also say the students were not the instigators. And the lawsuit filed by the Sandmann family says the Washington Post used its, quote, vast financial resources to enter the bully pulpit by publishing a series of false and defamatory print and online articles, which effectively provided a worldwide megaphone to smear a young boy who was, in its view, an acceptable casualty in their war against the president. The president also weighed in, first quoting the lawsuit and then saying this, quote, Covington students suing WAPO, go get them, Nick, fake news. And legal experts tend to agree the coverage could certainly hurt Nick Sandmann's reputation, but they also acknowledge that Sandmann's burden of proof is high, saying he has to show the Washington Post had reckless disregard for the truth, meaning the paper knew it was false and published it anyway. Tonight, Sandmann's lead attorney, Lin Wood, told Sean Hannity they will meet the standard. Watch.
Think about what this young boy is having to deal with at age 16 when the entire world saw him the way the media portrayed him, as literally the face of evil. It is inexcusable, reprehensible conduct by the media. And the Washington Post led the way.
Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz also believes Sandmann has a reasonable case, and it's very notable this suit was brought in the Federal District Court of Eastern Kentucky. A jury there may have a much different take than a jury in D.C. Shannon.
Right you are, Trace. Thank you very much. So what are the odds that Nick Sandmann's attorneys score a big win? Well, let's bring in Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz and Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin. They join us now live to discuss. Gentlemen, welcome. Great to have you with us.
To be with you, Shannon.
Thank you.
All right, I want to read a little bit from the complaint. You know, Sandmann's attorneys say that this was all about the Washington Post ending up making young Nick Sandmann look racist. They say in targeting and bullying Nicholas by falsely accusing him of instigating the January 18th incident, the Post conveyed that Nicholas engaged in acts of racism by, quote, swarming Phillips, the Native American activist there, blocking his exit away from the students, and otherwise engaging in racist conduct. Alan, will this be enough to get what they're after, which is a $250 million verdict?
Well, that's asking for a lot of money, but whoever said that the plaintiffs have to prove reckless disregard are wrong as a matter of law. This young man is not a public figure. He was thrust into the public by the Washington Post and other media. He's just a high school kid, and he doesn't have that heavy burden to prove what you would have to prove against if you were a public figure. All he has to prove is that they told untruths about him, and those untruths resulted in harm to him. So it's a far easier case than if he were some kind of an elected official or a high government official, or if he had thrust himself into the news and made himself into a public figure. So I think he has a significant chance of either winning the case or the Washington Post capitulating and settling, which is something newspapers rarely do. But in this case, they may be better off settling the case than having the case litigated, particularly in a jurisdiction which won't be necessarily friendly to them.
Well, and that jurisdiction is where Governor Bevin is the governor in Kentucky, the Commonwealth there. I want to read something from an AboveTheLaw.com blog post. They say this case is about something else entirely. They say winning a defamation lawsuit isn't really the game we're playing here. Instead, we're fighting a new front in the culture wars, the front Trump has opened up against the media. The point is to chill other media from challenging the right wing. If enough of the media lives in fear of any teen in a MAGA hat, then this lawsuit was a success, even if it gets thrown out of court on a rail. Governor.
I tell you, it's remarkable that they would say that this is a war on the media by Trump in this case and those who support him. It's quite the opposite. This is literally the media finding, and it has been noted on topics throughout the course of this evening on your show, it's about victimhood. It's finding victims. In this case, it was the Native American who was drumming in the face of this young teen. He was the victim. It's now the Smollett fellow. He's the victim. That's what sells. It's tabloid journalism at its worst. It is a rush to the bottom. And it is a reflection on the culture in this nation, and it doesn't reflect well on us. It's unfortunate how we are trashing people if they are in any way, shape, or form seen to be associated with or perhaps able to be connected to the president in any way.
Yeah, and Professor, I mean, the legal team here spells that out very clearly. They say it's about the Washington, they say it's not a political case, but this is a case about what they call the Washington Post's bias against anyone who is connected to or appears to be supporting the president, as the governor said. In this lawsuit, they also say they want to teach Jeff Bezos, the owner of the Washington Post, a lesson. They say in order to fully compensate Nicholas for his damage and to punish, deter, and teach the Post a lesson it will never forget, this action seeks money damages in excess of $250 million, the amount Jeff Bezos, the world's richest person, paid in cash for the Post when his company, Nash Holdings, purchased the newspaper in 2013. Sounds like they're trying to make a very specific statement, Professor.
That's a serious litigation mistake. His lawyers are making a terrible mistake. They're playing right into the hands of the First Amendment argument. What they're saying is they're trying to chill free speech. They'd be much better off not making that argument and simply saying we represent one guy, a kid, his reputation has been hurt. This is not about Donald Trump. This is not about trying to chill the media. A serious tactical blunder by the lawyers. And my recommendation to this young man is he might seriously think about getting another lawyer who will take his case, bring his case, not try to bring a general case against the media, against Bezos, against the world. That is a blunder on the part of lawyers, and it raises the First Amendment issues. It invites the court to say, we're not going to try to chill free speech. We're not going to try to deter free speech. If this were merely about this young man being hurt, they'd have a much, much better chance of winning.
Well, the Washington Post says this, we are reviewing a copy of the lawsuit and we plan to mount a vigorous defense. I would imagine maybe step one, if this moves forward, is going to be to ask for a change of venue. In the meantime, Professor, Governor, great to have you both with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, trouble off the court for tennis great Martina Navratilova. She fought throughout her career for LGBTQ rights, but now she's being shunned by many within that community for questioning transgender athletes. Plus, Senator Kamala Harris says it was a joke, but her father is not laughing, calling out his daughter for what he says is identity politics. And an ISIS bride from Alabama wants to come home to the U.S., but the government says not a chance, even though she says she can be rehabilitated. Congressman Joaquin Castro of Texas authoring a resolution that would do just that. And the House is likely to vote on it by this Friday. California prosecutors charging 18-year-old UC Santa Cruz student Colin Howard with creating a drug-dealing software app. The Banana Plug app was available through the App Store and allegedly offered up cocaine and meth. Howard facing up to 40 years if convicted. Well, with ISIS reportedly near defeat in Syria, some so-called ISIS brides, women who fled freedom in the West to join the terrorist movement at its height a few years ago, now want to return to the countries of their birth. Well, David Spun is looking into one of these high-profile cases tonight. What's the latest?
Hey, Shannon, 59 Americans are known to have traveled to Syria to join ISIS. This is the story of just one of them, a woman who is determined to come back to the United States and admit her mistakes. Tonight, it appears she has quite an uphill battle.
Maybe therapy lessons, maybe a process that will ensure us that we'll never do this again.
People watching will say to themselves, well, therapy isn't enough.
I know that maybe speaking against them, which I'm definitely planning to do, definitely warning people to not make the same decision that I've made.
Muthana and her attorneys believe she should be allowed back into the States. She was born in 1994 in New Jersey. But things aren't so cut and dry. According to the State Department, she is not a U.S. citizen and never was. Her father was a diplomat living in the States when she was born. A spokesman for Muthana posted a photograph of what appears to be a birth certificate, arguing she was born after her father stopped his diplomatic service.
It's absolutely clear that Huda Muthana was born in New Jersey in 1994. She's a U.S. citizen. She was given a valid passport.
The State Department declined to get into specifics about Muthana's birth and claim of citizenship, but officials there continue to maintain she is not a U.S. citizen and she's not coming home. Shannon.
We will debate it with our power panel, David Spunt. Thank you very much. It's time now for 2020 in 60 seconds. Candidate Senator Kirsten Gillibrand reportedly siding with activists who say President Trump's border wall would block indigenous people from entering the U.S., citing it as another reason why the wall is, quote, so absurd and so hurtful. Well, the Democratic National Committee just announced it is handing out affirmation forms to 2020 candidates, requiring them to commit to running and serving as a Democrat if elected. Just days ago, independent Senator Bernie Sanders announced his presidential bid. Senator Kamala Harris's father, Donald, says it is a travesty. His daughter cited her Jamaican ethnicity as a reason why she tried marijuana and now wants to legalize it. He told the Jamaica Global Online their ancestors must be turning in their grave to see their, quote, proud Jamaican identity connected with the fraudulent stereotype of a pot-smoking joy seeker in the pursuit of identity politics. And because of the snowy weather, potential 2020 contender Congressman Eric Swalwell pointed out he had to postpone his morning coffee because the closest Java was inside Trump Tower, and he said there was no way he was going in there. Well, from victim to suspect to a felony charge is jail next for Jussie Smollett. The latest on the Empire Star when we're joined by the Power Panel. Leslie Marshall, Guy Benson, David Catanese, stay.
Call the police. There's a level of pride there. As a gay man, you were considered somehow to be weak, and I'm not weak.
Jussie Smollett defiant when interviewed by ABC News last week. Well, tonight this developing story appears to be unraveling even further for the Empire Star, now facing a felony charge in connection with a false police report. Time now to bring in our Power Panel to discuss. Fox News contributor Leslie Marshall and also Fox News contributor Guy Benson, plus senior politics writer for U.S. News and World Report, David Catanese. Thank you all for being with us tonight. Great to have you.
Good to be with you.
Hey, Thank you, Shannon. All right, I want to start by reading something from The Atlantic. It says the Smollett story, if the trajectory leads to evidence of fakery, would actually reveal something else modern America is about. Victimhood chic. Future historians and anthropologists will find this aspect of early 21st century America peculiar, intriguing, and sad. Guy?
Well, it definitely is sad, and it's strange. We don't know exactly what motivated Jussie Smollett to do this, but his story seemed very implausible, I think, from the get-go. With the MAGA detail, the performance on ABC News was practically sociopathic, given what we know now. And I think what bothers so many people is not just that he made up this hoax of a hate crime, which is terrible unto itself, because it takes police resources away, it sows fear, it sows resentments. In the process, he and other people who amplified the story in certain ways tried to implicate by extension a third of the country, half the country, smearing people as dangerous or violent based on political disagreements. This is sort of the perfect storm because he's this celebrity who's made the made this claim, and I think he's in more trouble than just filing one false police report with the Chicago police. The feds are involved, too. It could be a world of hurt for Jussie Smollett, and he deserves it. Yeah, and Leslie, tonight, of course, his counsel points out, in this country, you're innocent until proven guilty. These are allegations and charges by the police right now, so we stand by for the rest of this. In the meantime, Newsday says this: when someone lies about being a victim, it makes it that much harder for the next person to be believed. That's not debatable. It's just the truth. Leslie?
I'm so glad you asked me that, Shannon, because this is, to me, one of the saddest aspects. You do have those in the gay community, gay men, African American men who are gay, who are attacked. in the future, people are going to raise an eyebrow the next time somebody says, look, I was the victim of a hate crime, potentially, or there was a noose put around my neck, regardless if somebody is saying anything that is pro-Trump or wearing a Make America Great Again hat. What makes this so disgusting is African Americans, specifically African American men, and those in the gay community, whether gay men, lesbian women, trans, and the LGBTQ community, are victims of violence in our society. And if, in fact, this is true, he has taken away from those victims and for claims for future victims. And that's just horrific, especially for these segments of these populations in our society.
Well, and David, a large swath of the media has taken a beating in this as it plays out, too.
Yeah, I would say three things. I'd say the first thing is I'd reserve judgment. The media jumped on his story and went with it, and now we're jumping on the police story. So I want to hear the whole case before I make a judgment. Second thing I would say is if he did lie and do this interview, as Guy said, that is sociopathic, and that says more about him. And I think the third thing is a media lesson here. We're in a culture that we jump to the story. We're in a 24/7 cable news network, Twitter, Facebook, and the media needs to put more brakes on the pedal before we make proclamations about any case, even beyond this one.
Yeah, okay. I want to make sure we ask you all, too, about this phenomenon in this case now involving a woman who was born in New Jersey, joined over to go to ISIS, had apparently 3 different jihadi husbands. 2 of them were killed in battle. She says she's got a young child now, but she wants to come back to the U.S. The State Department is saying, no, she was never a citizen. So there's a dispute now about that, these documents that have been tweeted out. The lawyer, Hassan Shibli, tweeted this out. He says these are documents, proof that the U.S. government knew that as of September 94, Hoda Muthana's dad was no longer a diplomat. She was born at the end of October 94 in New Jersey. At Real Donald Trump has no authority to strip Americans of citizenship. Hoda wants to surrender to the legal system. But Leslie, as we saw in her interview there, she wants therapy, not jail.
Well, I think she needs a lot more than therapy, and there has to be punishment here. But I do think that we could learn a lot from this girl, and let me tell you why. One of the areas that we have a real problem, if you ask any counterterrorism expert, is with the radicalization through the internet. And that's what happened to her. And if she can talk about what appealed to her, what sites and, what the interaction was. Also, who she was married to, what they were discussing, what they were planning. I think this person could be a plethora of information. I think she was a young, impressionable teen. Teenagers have done, as you know, pregnancy pacts or run off with convicts.
To her defense, which I think says a lot for her case.
Yeah, there are teenage mistakes, and then there's joining ISIS, right? These are not one and the same. I think it is a material fact whether or not she is a U.S. citizen.
That'll have to be debated.
That might be, a question in terms of whether she has certain rights. But if she is one, let's just say, and the State Department's wrong, and she does come back, therapy is not going to cut it. This was aiding and abetting ISIS, a terrorist organization, and to make it about the child that she has back home, she's responsible for her decision, and that decision was a catastrophically bad one.
Yeah, and apparently her legal team is filing in federal court on the citizenship question, so we'll watch and see as that plays out. But they also say she wants to surrender to federal authorities, so I think that they'll probably go beyond therapy if that happens. All right, Power Panel, thank you very much. If you'll stick around, we have more to discuss with you after this break. LGBTQ advocate and tennis great Martina Navratilova and LGBTQ firestorm tonight. Our Power Panel graciously sticking around for this. So welcome back to all of you. I'll read a little bit from an op-ed that Navratilova wrote. She said, a man can decide to be female, take hormones if required by whatever sporting organization is concerned, win everything in sight and perhaps earn a small fortune, and then reverse his decision and go back to making babies if he so desires. It's insane and it's cheating. I'm happy to address a transgender woman in whatever form she prefers, but I would not be happy to compete against her. It wouldn't be fair, David.
I mean, I think she lays the case out pretty well. How you identify in your gender, I think, is becoming more accepted in society. But frankly, this is about having a different body. Males and females have different bodies. And frankly, the U.S. Olympic Committee has standards about testosterone levels. And if you're a trans man, it doesn't matter. But if you're a trans woman, to compete, you have to be below a certain testosterone level, because that has impact on the strength that you have to compete. She is obviously suffering the backlash, but I think if anyone was able to bring the case to the public, it is her with credibility.
Yeah, and she had been with this group, Athlete Ally, and they issued a statement saying this: the LGBTQ community is not a monolith. We must always leave space to learn from one another and to grow. If we fail to do so, we are not only failing our goal to advance LGBTQ equality as a whole, but failing to live up to the core of our potential as human beings who believe all of us deserve a place in sports and in this world. And Leslie, a number of these groups are breaking ties with her or disavowing her position after she was pretty much a pioneer and out there as one of the early advocates for a lot of these LGBT issues.
And I think that's why so many people were surprised that she, of all people, was the one that said this and said what she did. Especially, David, thank you, because that's a point that I was going to make, which actually would assuage any fears that she or other athletes have about a trans woman because of the testosterone level and because of the rules in these professional sports. I understand what she was saying. I know a lot of people have that concern in the athletic world, in the athletic community, but because it is her and because there is such a sensitivity and more acceptance and a zero tolerance toward negativity in the LGBTQ world, I'm not surprised at the backlash, and I was very surprised that she said what she did, being her.
All right. I believe this is from the New York Post. The title of the article, "The Insane Gay Backlash Against Martina Navratilova," saying this: even with hormone treatment, transgender women have more muscle mass and bone density and higher levels of oxygen-carrying red blood cells, which aid athletic ability. That's a real issue, especially at the high school and college levels where students are also competing for scholarships. So now this longtime gay icon is being ostracized for her heterodoxy by those she so vigorously championed when it was professionally risky. For shame. Guy.
Yeah, so she was a trailblazer, and she is making a case. She said something like this a while ago and came under fire. She went back, did more research, and came out swinging again, saying, I believe even more that this is the case. And there's some of the science behind this. It's not just hormones. It's not just testosterone. There are questions about muscle mass and other advantages that a biological male might have. And I think there's a lot of Americans, increasing number of Americans, who want to fully respect the dignity of trans individuals, treat them with respect, treat them with the pronouns that they would prefer and all of that. And you can respect that. There is a separate question when it comes to athletic competition. What is fair? What is not fair? And I think that the types of questions that are raised by this tennis star in the LGBT community, she should not be shunned and thrown out of the community because she's raising completely reasonable, legitimate questions that ought to be discussed and debated. And the answer should not be, you shut up, go away. The answer should be, actually, let's have this conversation.
All right. Guy, David, and Leslie, thank you for having the conversation with us. Great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, up next, the latest on why Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is being singled out in a big way right in the middle of Times Square. And meat eaters, not man-eaters, meat eaters, beware. In part 3 of our series examining how green... Correspondent Doug McElway tonight continues our week-long series on what the Green New Deal could mean now for your family's menu choices.
For all the cow flatulence jokes it spawned, the Green New Deal is serious about the threat of cow methane. Scientists have literally bagged it and found that a dairy cow produces up to 400 liters of methane a day. The EPA says it's up to 25 times more powerful a greenhouse gas than CO2. Livestock pose other problems.
It requires more resources to produce meat than it does to produce plant-based food.
Senator Cory Booker told Veg News, quote, this planet simply can't sustain billions of people consuming industrial-produced animal agriculture. Farm State Senator Chuck Grassley says that kind of criticism is naive.
We have a member of the House of Representatives who knows this about food. Food grows in supermarkets, not on farms.
It is ludicrous to think that ag, which is about 9% of total emissions, in meat production is even less, about 1.5, that is going to solve climate change.
The Green New Deal also proposes accelerating the trend to sustainable local farming.
Many beginning farmers are now starting in a direct-to-retail sort of a business, like selling direct at a farmer's market or through a community-supported agriculture subscription sort of marketplace.
Critics fear dismantling big agriculture's economies of scale that help feed the world cheaply. Add Add the elimination of fossil-fueled tractors, combines, and other tools that allowed farming to be handled by about 2% of the population, and you have potentially disastrous consequences.
Energy use lifts people out of poverty. It brings them longer and better lives. And I lived in Africa, and I can assure you that without energy, life is brutal and short.
Cynics of the Green New Deal argue that's why it includes so many non-climate related proposals. The hardships and higher costs it would impose would require a vast expansion of the government's safety net.
Guaranteed jobs for everyone that include retirement benefits, health insurance, and a, quote, living wage. There's universal health